You could come and join me, Anne-Marie from TELUS. Anne-Marie is the Vice President of TELUS. For those of you that don't know her, she's been an architect of one of Canada's most recognisable brands and instrumental, alongside Joe and the team, of creating the customer first strategy. I'm going to just stall for Katie. and Anne-Marie,
you're fun.
Anne-Marie.
Amazing. I couldn't even look. It was so funny.
I'm trying not to laugh and failing miserably.
Are you okay? I feel like you need a hug.
Oh, thank you.
And Anne-Marie was named the Canadian Marketer of the Year by Strategy Magazine in 2011. Also joining us, Philip, whose mic is on. I'm going to wait until yours is on. Philip, founder of Flintlock, but recently, but before that, seemingly a Diageo lifer, behind the huge success, a lot of it advocacy-driven, of the Smirnoff brand, and then also driving all of the Diageo brands across Africa before he started out on his own. And Nina, Be More Dog. We've just seen some of her work and heard from Ronan earlier. She is, beyond her role at O2, also the chair of the International Business Advisory Board at British Airways and previously at Barclaycard. And now that she's got... Have you got a mic? Katie.
I have got a mic.
Katie
Glamorous
now...
as ever.
Katie, now Managing Director and Chief Customer Officer for the DowJones Wall Street Journal, but recently also when she was here full-time in the UK with News Corp and The Sun and The Times, leading a big advocacy drive through Times+. So it's great to have all of you here, all of you driving advocacy in different ways. And I think I might start with you, Nina. In our first session, Martin asserted that he thought advocacy actually wasn't the new advertising, and that trial was key, and I sort of kind of agree with that in FMCG. But if you look at the campaign we just saw, clearly advertising has a role to play in amplifying what it is that you're doing, but it seems that the core of what you're doing is giving your customers not only excellent service, but beyond excellent service, access to things they wouldn't get otherwise, and the role of the advertising is to amplify that. Would that be a summation of your strategy, or do you look at it differently?
No, I think that would be. So Ronan mentioned it's about rededication to our customers, and absolutely is. So I'm familiar with Martin's, what Martin was talking about. In fact, there was a book written by Brian Sharp, I think, which talks about the same point. I'm not sure that it works in telecoms. Because particularly mobile, so there's now, 90% penetration of mobile phones. It's a zero-sum game. So do we want to go out there and fight over other customers, or do we want to actually look after our own customer base? And the answer has to be the latter. So it's 24 million customers. So something like priority, we're at risk of being a utility. And I think there was some discussion about that at the last panel. So how do we make our customers feel valued and special? And that's really what's behind priority. So it's a digital loyalty program, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. It's the largest one in the UK, something like an offer is redeemed every 12 seconds, or something ridiculous like that. But what's important is we don't make profit from it. So we look for offers that are relevant to our customers, and those are the ones that we source and put onto the website and the app, as well as early access to music and entertainment and rugby, that sort of thing. And why we do it is because it helps build brand engagement, it helps build loyalty, and it makes us relevant. So if I look at the figures for customers who are heavy users of priority, they're half as likely to churn as non-users, half as likely. And they're 20 percentage points more likely to recommend us, as well as they buy more of our products and services, and they stay with us longer. So it's really clearly a value to them. I guess another example, which I think is really important as well, because it's something that maybe isn't as obvious, but something like gurus, which are in-house tech specialists, and we've got, I think about 600. So we have in-store and then web chat and voice. They're completely free of charge. They have no incentives to sell. They're available to O2 customers and even non-O2 customers. And again, just customers who are aware of them are 11 percentage points more likely to recommend us, and are I think 11 percentage more likely to have trust in us. So that experiential element and clearly giving something that's a value really does drive advocacy in a way that pure advertising can't. And I think it's got to be part of the total customer experience as well.
Katie, let me turn to you because, again, back to that debate this morning where, and we'll come on to this, Philip, when we talk about FMCG, but we talk about telco businesses where you say, there's huge penetration and you're developing your loyalty schemes, your advocacy for that reason. In your previous business here in the UK with News Corp, that is a business that had gone through significant challenges selling newspapers and was needing to move towards becoming a digital subscription business and probably needing to do that fast. Is there an argument that creating advocacy, and hopefully you'll talk a bit about it in terms of TELUS, wasn't a nice to have, as perhaps a priority is in terms of driving marketing, but was a must have because of the degree of change in your business?
So the driver wasn't the actual struggles that News UK went through. Actually, I want to pick up on something Nina said, which is ultimately, we heard from Jeremy about action, and I look at advocacy and I think it's about taking affinity, adding action, and that's what drives the advocacy. And in my case as a publisher, there's a lot of latent affinity in the brands, whereas in your case, you've built a product around O2 priority, and you've built the affinity, and then you've linked it to action, and that's driving the advocacy. For us in publishing businesses, there's loads of latent affinity with those brands. I mean, you all know how you feel about your newspaper or your media brand of choice. So for us, it's been about unlocking the affinity through programs like Plus, which obviously we have Times Plus, Sun Plus, we have Wall Street Journal Plus now, and we also have News Plus in Australia. So we actually have a global membership drive and building of a Plus program. So it's not just a Times product. So yes, it probably helped us through a very tough time. The thing actually there was about rebuilding trust, which actually is something about the product. But the affinity piece was about, our program was to unlock it. So we've got similar data points. Yeah. It's amazing what the difference it makes.
And Anne-Marie, let me turn to you. You have, again, for those of you not familiar with it, probably a 15-year campaign that is the most famous, most loved advertising property and campaign in Canada. But over recent years, as we saw an example of, you've been moving significant chunks of your marketing efforts and focus into advocacy driving initiatives. Tell us what your thinking is there.
Okay. I'm not sure, so I'm going to need your guidance or cultural difference. Being Canadian, I don't know if I can respectfully disagree with the Sir Martin Sorrell. Is it okay if I respectfully
Yes, you can.
disagree? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Not even respectful, just
Tick.
great.
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
okay. I just don't know. I don't know. And so I would want to start by saying that I would like to respectfully disagree with him, and I'm sure you'll get back to him. So make sure that you write respectfully disagree. But I really think that the movement towards advocacy, and it's not about advocacy, it's about consumers owning the message and consumer owning the relationship, has tremendously changed the role to me for an agency. So I can only speak for TELUS when I say that, and you know that as we were doing this movement towards, and Joe's really talked about it extremely well this morning when he talked about the fact that we, in 2008, 2009, realized that, you know what, we're not a telco. we're a service company, and we're into providing a service. And so through this journey, we realized that we had to change completely the way that we communicated with consumers. And to do this, we need help of our agency. And I think that if you have an agency that spits out quarterly campaigns that are unidirectional, and that is not going to work. So therefore, we're now a partner with the And-Partnership, and very, very happy about that. But I think it's about a strategic. That's what you told me to push,
all
right?
plugged. Well done.
Good.
Thank
Check that box.
Wow, you're doing really well.
But thank you. Some of you should know that they don't exist in Canada, so we kind of took this crazy leap of faith. We don't know if it's going to work, to be honest, but we're hoping that it will.
It was advocacy in action until that point.
Exactly. You might never see me again here, but while I'm here, I will enjoy it. So I think that we need to. I think that has completely changed the model. We need to provide content. We need to be storytellers. We need to be, relationship experts, because it's about building a relationship with consumers. And I always say that advocacy to me is the emotional evolution of believability. We need to have people and consumers believe in what we do. Advocacy comes after this. So in order to do this, yes, CSR, corporate giving, is absolutely something that is important. But you know what? We can give millions of dollars across the country, because and Joe's talked about we give where we live. But if we cannot provide good experience for consumers, they won't stay with us because of that, and they won't advocate because of that. We do this because we know it's right, because we believe that as a major Canadian corporation, we have to do good with our community. And we profoundly are passionate about this at TELUS. And it's not about the big flashy campaign. It's about bettering all these the small communities. But I think that advocacy starts with making people believe. Our greatest challenge is that we are different fundamentally. We've been on a 5-year journey. We've transformed the way that we engage with our consumers, but they don't believe in us yet. So we need to really, really define a strategy, a communication strategy, into how to make Canadians believe that we are different. And this is really, in all transparency, where we're at. We have not. L2R advocacy is better than our competitors, but we're not at all where we want to be. We don't even compare ourselves to Canadian telcos, because comparing ourselves to the worst is always, makes you feel good for a moment. But so we're on a very interesting journey. It's very exciting.
Philip, it's interesting because, back to Martin's point this morning, here we've got businesses that have significant scale, lots of customers, penetration, etc. Your recent experience in Africa, is that still a market where traditional advertising, packaging your messaging, broadcasting it, levels of awareness and trial are key, or has advocacy got a role to play?
I think advocacy has a massive role to play, but it's just about how you can communicate the advocacy. So if you're in South Africa, you could pretty much do it in exactly the way that we would in Europe or Canada. Once you get out of South Africa, the penetration of the sort of hardware is 15%, and of that 15%, probably 10% is actually connected to a network where there's any sort of communication potential, if you get what I mean. So you have to do it in a different way. So I'll give an example from Ghana. So in Ghana, the number one crop of Ghana is the cassava plant. And so it's grown by a huge amount of the population, but the problem is that it rots almost immediately after it's grown. So you'd see just piles of cassava lying beside the road rotting. So we went to the government and said, look, it's possible to make beer out of cassava, and you've got a really big problem with illicit alcohol, which is people making stuff in buckets out the back of houses and causing all sorts of health problems. But it's very expensive to make beer out of cassava. So let us show you the structural economics. And if you give us this duty break, we can make a little bit of money, but what we can do then is put in vertical infrastructure, encourage farmers to grow cassava, give them a market for cassava, et cetera, et cetera. Created this beer and took it to the market and thought, how are we going to get this out there? And we thought, well, frankly, this is the first beer which is building true Ghanaian culture. So we just literally got a handheld camera, got a local comedian who went and spent a day with the farmers, harvesting the cassava, a day in the factory making the beer, and a day with the guys on all the trucks, you see driving around delivering it, and just showed their lives and what they did. And we went to the TV company and said, give us the slot in between the news, because that's the program everyone watched, and look, we're doing this for Ghana. They gave us the slot. We couldn't make enough beer instantaneously. It went to the number 3 beer in Ghana in 3 months. And it would have gone higher if we could get enough cassava to make it quicker. So, and what we did there is we made the growers, the people, the advocates of the brand. And what was fascinating about it was you saw the impact on culture, because the guys who were growing the beer now had money. They went into the town and they went to the shops, and then the person opened a little bar up in the shop, and then that person wanted some furniture, so they went to the little guy around the corner who built the furniture for the bar, and then they needed a delivery guy who had a bicycle, and the kegs were a size where they could fit on a bicycle, so he cycled off. And we had NGOs coming to us saying, God, you've done more for development by empowering people and making the economy drive society than we've been able to do by giving handouts for the last 5 years. So I think advocacy is incredibly important wherever you are in the world. It's just about what media channel that you use to make it famous.
But was the beer any good?
It was fantastic.
Interesting, just pick up on that point about channels, because years ago, if you were doing the jobs you guys are now doing, you could argue it was probably easier because you had a choice of paid for media to divide your marketing budget up between, and you'd say, if I need to, raise awareness, I'll put this amount on posters and I'll be in the centre break news at 10 because everybody watches that, and etc. In this new world where the penetration you talked about, Nina, is where it is, and where you've got businesses, particularly, I guess, in Western developed markets that have a lot of customers, how do you work out how to allocate your marketing spend, and how does that advocacy piece play a part in that? How do you figure out at the beginning of the year where that's going to go?
I'll start. So I think this is a particularly interesting question for a mobile phone company, because we have the challenge of what we want to say is often said through the actual device we're selling. So we have to have complete consistency across all of our channels. That's really, really important. How I go about figuring out where I'm going to put my money, I guess, is based on what I want to say and to whom, and then using the best channels to do that, as you'd expect. But it's definitely getting clearly much more complex. I spent all of Friday at my media agency, which was just this morning, but Havas, and all day going through and sitting on the trading desk and looking at programmatic, because that is so core to what we're doing, and how we can actually take it further from just being normal ads, actually using programmatics, getting video the right way. So that's core. Digital in total is about 40% of our spend, and of course it helps drive advocacy. But I guess just coming back to an earlier point, the other thing, ultimately, I believe advocacy is driven by whether you like someone or a brand. And so authenticity is key to that. The persona is key to that. The tone of voice is key to that. And it's got to be delivered across the total experience. So there's still a role for advertising, whether it be big broadcasts, as we saw, or print or digital. There's a role for the whole marketing mix. It's just a more complex role. And I think the key is making sure there's a consistent tone of voice across all of the channels.
Katie, you were having to tackle that question in the UK. You're now having to tackle that question as you look at a brand that operates across lots and lots of countries.
Yeah.
How do you approach the allocation of marketing spend, and how do you know, as that old phrase was, half my marketing budget's wasted, I just don't know which half?
So again, I could respectfully disagree. I don't respectfully disagree. I just disagree with Martin that it's all about trial. Because actually the US, the experience for me moving from the UK market into the US is much more focused on acquisition marketing than it is actually on retention marketing. And so to Nina's point, I think one of the things we've started looking at is actually looking at our customer base, understanding, getting rid of dark pricing, getting rid of a lot of behaviours that don't look at your loyal customers, and rebalancing our spend so that we are thinking about trial and acquisition, because that's still important because we want to grow, but really like shifting a large proportion of that into retention, of which and in which advocacy is an important part of how we see the retention model working. So hence WSJ Plus, which is our membership and loyalty program, very much like Priority Moments, but slightly more business oriented and less cats. Although lots of fat cats you do buy the paper, so we'll look at it that way. So I think the thing I would add, because I agree with what Nina was saying, the thing I would add is that, you know, it's about how we then measure that. So instead of looking at our spend in a linear format, in a linear fashion, we sort of look at it as a sort of looped, a sort of affinity 8. And effectively, we're still spending money on awareness and acquisition, but we're shifting money into retention, and then the amplification of the advocacy that comes out of that retention program and connecting it back up. So I think the challenge for us is less about how do we allocate our money, because I think that's business sense and where the ROI is, and you just look at the ARPU and you know that that's an easier thing to sort of balance your money. It's about how you measure that closed loop, and you can see the impacts of all spend on each other. So that's our biggest challenge, actually, measurement within the industry. So actually making sure that you can measure cross-channel, all channel, so you can join it up. So I'd say that's still not fully fixed. There's been great progress, but actually measuring all of this is still our biggest challenge. Not allocating, measuring.
And it's hard, actually, I say it's harder than ever because of the proliferation of channels, proliferation of media impact. It's harder than ever. And doing really multi-channel attribution is the holy grail.
And the worst thing is now that CFOs think that because of digital, you can measure everything.
Yeah.
So actually,
It's the far west.
it's the kind of, it's almost come around a full circle, which is actually, in the past, the CFO accepted you couldn't measure everything. Now everything's digital and there's big data out there. Oh, you must be able to measure it all. Well, you can measure part of it, but we still haven't fully been able to build that out in a way that's really meaningful. So I'd say that's the sort of holy grail of next phase of what we really need as customer leaders and marketers.
And Jess is going to talk later, so I won't now about
Oh, am I going to steal your thunder?
And so we won't steal that thunder. But I think there's also an interesting question in that measurement thing about intermediate measures versus actual ROI. And I think there's a temptation. I know, in fact, Philip, we discussed this when you're at Diageo, a temptation which I'm sure is driven probably by agencies, to be fair, but maybe with marketeers complicit, that as new technologies come along and new fads, that suddenly, I think I remember you saying that you guys had made more, apps to show you how to shake cocktails than
find a bar.
Yeah, and find a bar and all those sorts of things, all of which everyone got very excited about, and we're as guilty as everybody else in this, in making apps that cost £15,000 to make that ended up having £25,000 doing them, and if you took the ROI back, you wouldn't like what the result was. And I guess one of the questions from that is measurement, actual ROI versus intermediate measures, because there is a danger that you show up at board meetings saying this had X million views or Y million likes, or particularly by the time you explode things on Twitter, you can make things sound like they got very, very big, but what are you actually measuring?
I tell you what, before I answer the measurement question, which I'll probably just skip over anyway, I'm actually going to defend Sir Martin Sorrell, which I think is a first.
Yeah.
And I think this whole thing about this whole thing about trial is often misinterpreted because it's about timeframes of your purchase cycle. So when the Flintlock team arrived at Hovis, everyone said to us, "Well, bread's got a 98% penetration. It's not about trial." We went, "Oh, great, okay. So how many times a year do people buy bread?" And they went, 48. I said, "Okay, so the purchase cycles weekly? Because basically you're buying a loaf of bread apart from when you're on holiday. They went, yeah. I said, okay, so what's your weekly penetration of bread? And they went, 22. So on a weekly basis, actually our job is to get trial. And it changed the mindset of the organisation from fighting in bread and fighting amongst itself about we're going to steal a bit from here and a bit from here, a bit from here. And we went, okay, so of that weekly penetration, where's it all going? And they went, oh, cereal. So we were like, well, can we stop having an argument about bread and can we start having an argument about how we're going to beat cereal? So it really, I think you have to think about trial in the context of your purchase cycle. Yeah. So to answer your previous question, how do you split it up? It's about your strategy. So, you know, if you're running a everyday commodity brand like Hovis, then it is about trial. It probably is about mass media, and it's about keeping your top of mind awareness as high as you possibly can, so that in a low impact shopping environment where you're on autopilot down the the shelf, that's the one I remember most. Put it in the basket. If you're talking about a high-end super premium spirit, it's about advocacy. Because it's an entirely different purchase cycle. You're buying it for entirely different reasons. So I don't think there's an either or. I think you basically have to look at what your business challenge is and go, okay, what one or maybe two things can I do brilliantly, which is going to have the most impact on that business challenge? And the thing I see happening time and time again is actually people not taking the choices. Mm-hmm. So they do a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of that and a bit of that. And that's when you end up, frankly, achieving bugger all. So it's not either or to me. It's about what's fit for the purpose and your business challenge at that moment in time.
So you're saying that some brands, advocacy is more important than others?
Yeah, some brands, advocacy is way more important.
Yeah.
Some brands, instant top of mind awareness in a low category. Yeah. It's just about the brand, really.
And in that
loyalty for Hovis.
in that context, I know you're now bread and Hovis and Flintlock, not booze, but just to go back to that, I thought we highlighted it in the video. Well. Okay, well there we go. The tie-up with P. Diddy.
Yeah, fascinating.
Do you see that as a one-off, or do you actually see the power of? Because again, in 1980. You'd have wandered into, Martin would have hoped, one of his agencies, into J. Walter Thompson or wherever and said, we need to create a story, or Frank Lowe used to say, we'll create a piece of entertainment that'll be so amusing and engaging, etc., that the consumer won't mind, that we'll stick the name of our brand at the end of it and they'll remember it and that will get us saliency and trial and etc. And fantastic campaigns like Heineken and Hovis and all sorts of things worked exactly to that model in a world in which everybody was watching television and etc. Somebody clearly at Diageo said, well, we're not going to follow that business model. Let's get P. Diddy to be our, I don't know the details of the deal, was a 50-50 business partner, and use his power of advocacy to drive the trial, credibility, affinity, advocacy for this product. Is that a one-off? Is that a PR stunt, or is that a new business model?
I think it's back to the previous point, which is there's some brands, and super premium brands being a particular genre of them, where advocacy really works. But to really understand the power of this deal, you have to understand the power of P. Diddy, which I think you have to live in America to really get. But there's a difference. Number one, he's an owner versus just an advocate. And that completely changes the way he's behaved on that brand. And number two, the rap industry in America totally embrace brands, and actually the fans of rap music in America totally embrace brands in a different way than, say, we would in the UK. So being an owner and thinking about brands in that way, he would do things like with Ellen DeGeneres on national TV, which no other celebrity has ever sort of really done before, which massively drove the awareness of Ciroc beyond any sort of expectation. But that's only half the story, because what you don't see is, my God, does that bloke execute? So his agency does all the work, but they also control a lot of the very best DJs and stars and talent in America. And basically, if you want any of those people to turn up at your club or your venue or do anything, they will be in there, they'll merchandise the rock, they'll get it listed, they'll do the deal, and it is an intrinsic part of the relationship. So actually, if you looked at his ability to drive the performance of that brand, I would say probably 60% was his executional ability and 40% was his star status. And without the two, it would never have had the unbelievable impact it's had.
I mean, Nina, I think we heard this when we were talking to Ronan yesterday, I don't know if it's true or not, you'll tell us, was that something like 70% of the audience at the first Beyonce tour concert were O2 customers. That might be the CEO giving different figures to the CMO. But the power of that connection, can you just talk a bit about that?
Yeah, actually, I think it's different. So I think in the case of Beyonce, similarly Ed Sheeran, so this is another part of priority, which is giving customers 48-hour early access to tickets. And it means that often the artists will come to us saying, they want to do an ad, we don't have to pay for their time, they want to do the ad to promote their tour because they know they'll sell the tickets sort of from the get-go. For me, that's not advocacy, though. So it's a core part of, I would say music is in O2's DNA, clearly the O2, plus the other academies. There's a very tight affiliation, and it's seen as a real benefit to customers. So I think that's different. I wouldn't say that Beyonce or Ed Sheeran or any of the others are endorsing or advocating anyway O2. I think it's a slightly different relationship. I think what's interesting, though, about the example that Philip talked about is I guess it's similar to the new one, David Beckham, isn't it? It's a similar sort of. I think what works for me in there is that because the celebrity is part owner, I guess, there's complete authenticity. It doesn't feel like it's just slapped on. And again, I keep coming back to that word because I think it's so important. So it works because customers can see that it's not simply somebody saying something about the brand, that actually they're a part of it. I think that's why it's worked so well. I think another brand that's been able to do it very well is Beats, for example, where you really can't tell the difference between their paid for talent-based marketing and their unpaid for earned celebrity usage. So I think there are ways for it to work very well.
My view on this, though, so I just think that if you, at the end of the day, your product has to be good. The tequila has to be drinkable, no matter how much you love P. Diddy. If it's shit, it's not. So I think that to me, to hire stars and to pay stars to talk about, and I agree that I think that the partnership makes a huge difference because consumers will see, and will identify imposters, and just they'll feel it if you're just paid to speak to it. I think if you want to accelerate and turbocharge the awareness of a product, it will do the job. But at the end of the day, if the quality of the product, if it's a product that you sell, or if it's an experience that you sell, if it's not great, consumers will not advocate on behalf of the product. What they do is they advocate on behalf of the star. So Kim Kardashian could put her name on everything and at the end of the day, they'll say, I saw Kim Kardashian, what was she selling? Not sure, but it was Kim. Then it was this Super Bowl ad where she was, taking pictures of hers. I don't even remember the product, but I remember that she was taking selfies everywhere and it was all about her. So I think that if really we are I think it's got its purpose around, in my view, around creating awareness if it's well done and well executed. But otherwise, to me, if we are defining advocacy as someone who will preach on behalf of your brand, then to preach on behalf of a brand, you do it because your personal experience of that brand has been amazing. So there's no, we're all, in advertising, but there's no advertising that can buy this. It has to start and be about the experience. And, same thing with Will.i.am. Like if the product at the end of the day, if you start reading your paper and I think that's where it has to start. And it is outside in around the message. And to me, back to your question about your split, your media split, I think that you have to look at what kind of message do you want. Is it a message to sell? Is it a promotional, tactical message? Is it a message around your brand and creating that, talking about the purpose of your brand, or is it a message about, leadership and therefore you go outside in. At TELUS, the way that we strategize now, media has completely changed. We used to have a media plan, and then that dictated creatives to write TV spots in out of home, and then go to consumers and telling them how great we were. And now we go, okay, what do consumers want? We go outside in, research, understanding, what kind of language, and then we work it back. Big ideas, strategy, purpose, and then we work on media. So we are doing lots of programmatic, lots of SEM, SEOs, and spending lots of money there. But at the end of the day, what will dictate how we buy media is what message do we want to convey to consumers. So,
can I pick up
Katie,
on the
yeah,
celebrity?
I wanted you to.
For us Brits in the audience, there is that moment where we've all sat in a room and our boss has said, I'd like a testimonial ad, and we've all slightly cringed inside ourselves because we think that's probably not very believable, to pick up on this authentic point. And obviously, so I arrive at the Wall Street Journal, I've been there 2 minutes, and the boss, the big boss, says, I want testimonial ads. I'm thinking, oh, shit. So obviously, I hand the brief to the agency and the And-Partnership, obviously. And I think, God, this is going to be toe curling. But it comes back to this point, which is, in the end, every single celebrity, if you want to call them that, but actually they're all Wall Street Journal subscribers. And the thing that I found in the US that's very different to the UK is that actually the Journal brand is a convening brand that people want to be associated with. Yeah. And actually, we haven't paid any of those people to sit and do any of that advertising or endorsement or advocate reading. It's part and parcel. They want to be part of it. They want to be associated with the Journal. You'd never get that here in the UK, right? You would never get in the UK a famous business person saying, I want to be in an ad to talk about the Times. That would never happen, right? But in America with the Journal, these business kind of people have come forward, and now we get calls most weeks from CEOs of major American corporates saying, can I appear in your advertising campaign, please? It's slightly awkward when it's Deloitte's and you feel like you have to say no, but you sort of go, okay, we'll do a trade campaign for you, that's lovely. But it genuinely, it has to be, to Nina's point, if it is true, if it's absolutely real, it's fine, but it's only part of it. Yeah. The fact that Will.i.am can sit and talk about why he reads the Journal, and Tory Burch and Bill McDermott, the bouffant man that runs SAP, beautiful hair, very much like Bill. That's great, but it is part of advocacy. It isn't the whole piece. And I learned a lot, right? I learned a lot, which is that the Journal has much more affinity with its audience, because not only is it a great product, but it has helped these people in their careers genuinely, and it's made them rich. So they feel a huge kind of amount of affinity with that brand, and they're prepared to be associated with it because it says something about them when they stand up and talk about it. So it's real, right? It's real. And in the UK, we use cats because we prefer animals, right? An animal in an ad in the UK is a wonderful thing.
It's a no-brainer. But I think the Will.i.am endorsement, if you will, worked because it was very true to him. He spoke about the things that are important to him. And if you know Will and what he talks about and where he spends his time, it is all about youth, disadvantaged youth, entrepreneurship. So he spoke about the Journal in the context of what's important to him. So it felt very closely aligned, and therefore I think it did feel authentic and credible.
And he turns up at stuff. And CEOs love celebrity as well, though. So when he turns up at drinks events, he is the star of any drinks event that we now host. No one wants to talk to our CEO, unfortunately.
Let me take some questions from the audience up here.
We've spoken a lot about different forms of advocacy, in terms of PR and brand advocacy, content advocacy, peer-to-peer advocacy, employee advocacy, and then quite a bit now about spokesperson advocacy. There's obviously quite a old school type of advocacy that still happens, which is incentivized advocacy, and refer a friend programs. Does anyone on the panel have a thought about whether that still plays a part when we're clearly moving into a world where authenticity and things being organic is very key to that customer perception of how you want them to go out in the world and talk about your brand?
So You know, I know for some brands like Sky, it's still the lever that they pull at the end of every quarter because it works. For brands like The Times, we've tried it many times in the journal, it doesn't work, right? The way it works is a parent to a child off to university. You know, it has to, you know, for some brands it works and for others it doesn't. So we've never cracked refer a friend. I'm looking at Chris, who's now the CMO of The Times. Have you cracked it yet? Right, okay, there you go.
No progress.
I left it in his capable hands, he's not moved it on, so.
We have a friends and family program, and I think that you know, we're both wireline and wireless providers, so I think that our employees are very, very proud of our product, and they, you know, they would obviously, if you know, your spouse is on a competitor, I mean, it's not something that you should be proud of. So I think that naturally our employees want to have their friends and family using our products. I would say now more than ever, maybe when our product and services were not up to standard, it might have been more that you'd go to Sunday night dinner and, you know, have an earful for the entirety of everything. So I think that now they do it more proudly. I think that we're right now obsessing on trying to figure out how to create team member advocacy. Ronan talked about it, you know, how it has to come from within. We're trying to crack it, and as part of this, I think that you talked about incentivize. I would love to get to a point where our team members would promote naturally our product and services without having any kind of you know, monetary reward at the end. Not because we don't want to pay, we'll gladly pay, but and I'm pretty sure that they lots of them do it today, but that it would come that they're so passionate about talking about our brand and the experience of our brand that they would naturally do it without the incentive. So we'll get there.
We actually, we haven't done it for customers necessarily. We have a friends and family program. Mm-hmm. But last year we launched a rally cry called Going for 10 out of 10 for our customers. And this was part of generating employee advocacy or colleague advocacy, which Dada spoke about. And we said we want to go for 10 out of 10 of our customers. We know that the things that make our customers happiest, however you define that, are things like using priority. As I said, that really is meaningful. We know that if they use our app, MyO2, which is how you manage your bill, again, they're much more likely to be satisfied. So we said we want to get as many of our customers using these digital services as we can. We want you, our employees, you use them, get your friends and family on them, talk to people about it. We set up a Yammer site, and we also said at the end of the year, there will be a small bonus, but meaningful for many front-of-line people if we hit our targets, and they were real stretch targets. And the momentum it created inside, where people were posting on Yammer, you know, this is me talking on a train to somebody, and some of our store colleagues said, you know, we just realized that if we put in an NFC reader, we can get people signed up to Priority app right in the store. And so we said, that's a great idea, let's do it. So it really created this energy, huge momentum. At the end of the year, the likelihood of our colleagues to recommend O2's products and services went up to 90%. Image went up to a high, pride in the company went up to a high of about 81%. So it really created this groundswell. But most importantly, it also got lots of our customers using these products and services. So it benefited us commercially. And so we were therefore happy to share the bonus with the rest of the colleagues as well. So I think it can work, and it worked very effectively for us. And we're repeating it again.
Just to build on your point, a slightly different take. Old school advocacy, bartenders. I mean, if you think of all the spirits brands that you know and love now and you adore, they were built bar by bar by bar by bartenders. I'll tell you a funny story about Smirnoff. Smirnoff was bought by the Sidney Frank organisation when the family fled out of Russia into Paris, and didn't work because all that Americans drank at that point in time was whiskey. And they tried to position it as this white whiskey, and it didn't work. And one night, Sidney Frank was sitting with his friend who owned a ginger beer business, and his girlfriend who had just inherited a copper cup making business. And they were sitting there going, "Oh, it's bloody awful. We can't make any of these things work." So they made the Moscow Mule, which was Smirnoff, ginger ale, and it served in a copper cup. And they're like, how the hell are we going to get people to drink this? And they just invented the Polaroid camera. So Sydney, this is the chairman of the then Diageo in America, went into a bar with a Polaroid camera. He said to the barman, yeah, I'd like you to try the Smirnoff Moscow Mule. And the barman was like, drink that Russian rubbish? No way. It's like, look, if you drink it, I'll take a photo of you drinking it, and you can take the photo home to show your wife tonight, because they've just invented the Polaroid camera. And the guy's like, that's impossible, you can't do that. He goes, I can, you just drink the drink. So the guy drank the drink, he was like, oh, that's actually really nice. So he took 3 photos. One he left in the bar, which the barman pinned up, one he took home to his wife, and one he walked into the bar down the road and said, look, here's a photo of Fred drinking the Moscow Mule. And literally, that is how vodka became, they went bar to bar to bar. That is how vodka became the drink of America, and that's how the first cocktail, that invented the cocktail revolution. And it hasn't changed today. All these drinks that you think are overnight successes have usually been seeded bar to bar by advocates with real stories and real experiences over 5 years. So Magnus cider over ice, Hendrix with cucumber, they're all in the teapot. They're creating stories which people can advocate and experiences that people can tell about and spread. And so advocacy is as old as the hills. So in some ways, everything's changed, but nothing has changed, if would be my take on this situation. It's just making the right choice for your business challenge to know which lever to pull.
Just on that point, as I speak as an ex-bartender, so you're absolutely right, they hold all the power. There's a question then in between the difference between advocacy and sharing. I think one of the mechanics that has been most measured as a sort of way of saying, do people like us, is sharing. But in a lot of cases, sharing is a fairly empty thing. I'm just interested in the panel's view on when is a share an advocate share and when is it just distribution?
I'm fairly black and white on this, which I think sharing is... We all get so excited about sharing. Frankly, I've yet to be able to demonstrate much tangible business correlation between shares and business performance.
Well, I think that in our business anyways, like 95% of people will shop for mobile. I'll talk with mobile, not wireless. So they'll shop online before they go in store and purchase the product in store. So that's Canadian numbers. I don't know if it's the same here, but and out of that, I would say that the influence of your family and friends on social media is in the high 70s. So when we have consumers sharing about TELUS, it really, really matters to us. The only thing is, what we're realizing is that we're not expecting team members, our colleagues, and that's even higher if it's our team members and our employees sharing. Having said this, we believe that I'm not expecting them to share the new iPhone 6s at a sale. I think that any news about TELUS, for example, we have an ombudsman, so we have this government body in Canada that receives all the complaints on telecommunication. TELUS has been the best performing in Canada for many years, but they just released their latest report, and we have by far the best performance. So I'm giving you this as an example because we got 253 complaints versus our competitors all in this 5, 6, 7,000. We would want our team members, our employees, to share this, right? And so I think that if each one of our team members, we have 36,000 in Canada, we believe could convert one person, we would really start this movement. Jeremy was talking about a movement, but it was more around community, but this movement around advocacy about the good things that TELUS is doing. So not about product and services, because we'll have parity on product and services, but around how different we are. And so we believe that if I'm an influencer in my circle, which I think I am with my brothers, and I would talk about a product, talked about a restaurant or something like this, I know that they will listen because I have some influence on this group of people. So we're really counting, and that's why advocacy for us is so critical, but advocacy from from the core. So basically, and that's really hard when you're control freaks, because you're hoping that you could tell people and our employees what to say, and this is what, but it has to come from them. So so it's really meaningful for us.
I'll go back to the equation. Affinity plus action, I think, delivers advocacy, and I think sharing is just one of the forms of action. And it's become easier, and it's become, you know, democratized, and a share is a very easy thing to do. But I think you have to link it back to the kind of context of that share. So some sharing is meaningless in terms of creating advocacy, but others are really powerful. So, you know, if Nina's customers share a priority moment with their circle of friends, that's probably a very powerful share, versus if they share a bad customer experience, which we all experience. But then you know, that's a different type of sharing, and actually it's how we react to that sharing. That's not advocacy in creation of. So as far as I'm concerned, if you look at it as one of the actions, I think it's about giving our customers toolkits to take action easily. In our world, you know, we know this, we're building membership businesses, right? So actually sharing comes in many forms. You know, it comes in, it makes me feel clever. If I've read an article in the Wall Street Journal or the Times and I share it, there's a bit of self-worth that I deliver, because you can only share if you're a subscriber, because otherwise you can't get our content. So that's a reaffirming thing there. But it's also a way in, right? A share is also an invitation by another member to someone that isn't part of the Wall Street Journal or the Times. And that's a kind of recommendation, old-fashioned word-of-mouth marketing, bartender conversation, whatever you want to call that. So I do think it's an important part. I think it's just one of the tools, though, and one of the things that's in there. But it's not the only thing, because you have to have the affinity with the action to get the advocacy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And not to repeat, the only thing I would say is we have to, though, realize that it won't always be positive. So sharing is so important. It is, I think, a digital equivalent of the bartender. It's not always going to be positive, though. So to your point, we can't be control freaks. You have to ensure that the whole customer experience, you know, on balance, is more positive, and that ultimately you're giving more reasons to share the positive than the negative, and be transparent enough and open enough to address the negative if you can.
So on the negative, though, we're on this thing where I think that we need to realize that, you know, a negative conversation will happen no matter what. Exactly. I think we need to welcome it, and I think that a quick and efficient response to a negative comment, post, could be anywhere, is actually more value than a positive comment. And that is very important that we get that. So I think that as a telco, we might have a telecommunication company when we're a telco and not a, but we fear these. We try to hide them under the rug, and we're like, whoa, this is not happening. This conversation is not happening. Welcoming this conversation and saying, thank you for this feedback. Thank you for making us better. Having radically transparent is something I wrote down from Jeremy's presentation. I love that. And say, you know what, we fucked up. I don't know if I could say that in English, but I meant seal. Like in French, a seal is I'm on camera. Hey, Mom. But I think that we need to really get better. Overall, I think for all brands, we need to get better. And we welcome now, with this philosophy and mentality at TELUS, we welcome negative comments.
And we talk about angry tweets.
Angry tweet is amazing.
And
so, well, we didn't invent so, you know, Jimmy Kimmel, is it Jimmy Kimmel that does angry tweets? I mix them up all the time. But there's, one of the talk show hosts at night has one of his assistants during his show, and he reads angry tweets, and he has actors read angry tweets about them. So you'll see Tom Cruise read something super negative, and so we thought the idea was super smart, and we have our own team members read angry tweets from customers. There's a lot of beep, but so they'll say, you know, you screwed up my internet, and so we actually read the tweets, and we then tell the customer, thank you so much for this. This is what we've done to fix it. So if you go on TELUS YouTube page, you may see some examples of that, and we're going to continue with this. But we truly believe that our consumers' feedback, negative, mostly negative, I mean, you learn from your mistakes, not from your success, is actually a great growth opportunity for us. So that was a humbling session. Like when we started with this, we're like, do we want to do this? We bought some pre-roll, but we were kind of, you know, some semi-silence kind of thing, and then we increased the hum, but so it's good.
Yeah, I mean, I think to to that point about negative and positive, for me, it's not about share, it's what you guys are saying, which is about action.
Yeah.
So we'd had Smirnoff experiences forevermore, and they were all, put on a great party, put up a load of videos, and hope that, hey, look, here's something you weren't at last night. And that people were going to be, really, really motivated by it. So we changed it to the Nightlife Experience program, where the world swapped nights. And people, first of all, curated what swapped across the world. So you were part of saying what was best about your city and what you would want to export. Then you had the fight to get to the night, et cetera, et cetera. But the most successful thing was actually, after the big night, we said, right, we're going to put it on tour now. And we said, where shall we take it? And we allowed the UK and various other countries to compete for what city got the Nightlife Exchange programme. And then, you basically got more points relative to the action you took. So it moved from share into momentum, that whole point about a movement. And we literally changed it every week. So if one city got ahead, we'd go, oh God, Glasgow are winning a bit too much. So we'd invent something so people could nick points off Glasgow. And it became this amazing game. But the fascinating thing about it was at one point it fell over, and it fell over at course of 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning, where we probably weren't monitoring it as much as we should. And poor little brand manager went in, to try and fix it. And because they were so open about it, the community started defending the guys who were on there and said, "God, give them a break. They're doing the best they can." And it was a really positive experience where the community were like, "No, come on, let's all fix it together. Let's figure it all out." And da 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 da. So, yeah. I thought the talk earlier about creating movements was absolutely fascinating, because if you're in the drinks industry, you'll just see so many shares of, hey, I'm having a gin and tonic. They aren't value. It's when you can get people to move from shares into action where you really start to drive your business.
Very good. I think I better stop there and let us have a break. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
all four of you. That
Thank
was
you.
fascinating. Thank you.